Happy New Year. We made it. We survived the blizzard. We survived the holidays. We survived the New Year's. We survived New Year's Eve. Whatever you did, I presume you survived since you're actually watching the show. Well, to start the new year, we have our amazing friend, Congressman Langevin, who is in Washington, D.C., the sort of center of everything. And we're going to talk about net neutrality today because if anybody's going to know about it, it's going to be Congressman Langevin, who's the chair of the Cybercaucus. He's a congressman. Wow. It's like, I can't believe he's actually on the show. But, you know, they do let us do things like this sometimes. So stick around and we'll talk about net neutrality with the people who know.
This is a Security Weekly production.
Welcome to Secure Digital Life. And you type in AAA porn or whatever it is you're typing in. I'm sorry. I was at a PG show.
And I'm really excited to be here.
I'm glad you're here because somebody needs to know what's going on.
That's right.
Okay. So
now somebody has to drink this.
It's another day. It's another episode.
Yeah, he's looking at the wrong camera.
Oh, you put my camera over here. Cut. Basically, forget you ever saw that. I think actually forgetting you ever saw that would really be a good idea at this point. It's a new year, but things haven't changed. So today joining us, Congressman Jim Langevin, who is a congressman from the great state of Rhode Island, where we just happen to be sitting. He's sitting in Washington, D.C. Congressman, thank you for joining us.
Great to be with you, and Happy New Year.
Happy New Year to you too. It was interesting, and we all survived, and everything. We lived to fight another day. I know you don't have a lot of time, so we want to talk about net neutrality today, which has been a big deal. I know everybody's talking about Meltdown and all this stuff, and we have time. We'll talk about that a little bit too. But when did this net neutrality thing get started? I mean, where did this come from?
Well, it basically rolled out in 2005, where Congress had blocked peer-to-peer sharing applications. And as we all know, the internet was designed with this free and open architecture, and it's supposed to allow equal access. And so that kind of gave the first indication of doing a tiered approach to things on the internet based on what the ISP decided to allow access to, or gave the potential to start charging different companies for different bandwidth, different speeds on the internet. So in 2012, it was the FCC decided to make a policy statement that it was going to be a free and open internet, and that's where it kind of rolled out from there.
So where did the controversy come from then? I mean, was that because they were starting the fast lane, slow lane stuff back in the early, the tens or whatever they were starting to talk? Because I heard people talk about the fast lane, slow lane thing back in the, before 2010. They were talking about charging different rates, and a lot of people, including me, were talking about, well, should you pay more if you use more bandwidth and all these kind of things? Was that where the controversy started?
Well, one of the bigger things, again, 2005, they blocked the peer-to-peer, Comcast blocked the peer-to-peer sharing applications. Right. But then in 2012, when Apple rolled out FaceTime, that's when AT&T blocked FaceTime over the internet, as opposed to, because that's what they get their data basically from use of cell service. And so now, if you used the Apple FaceTime, you're able to communicate over the internet, and AT&T or the ISPs are basically losing out on revenue. And so that's when this really started to blow up, and then it was in 2014 that the FCC had issued a rule making it clear that this was going to be a free and open internet. That was actually thrown out by a court challenge, saying that the FCC didn't have the authority to regulate under that particular statute in that particular way. So that's why the FCC came back in 2015, and then they did create a new order that they would be able to pass court muster, and that they would be able to regulate in that space. And so it took a step toward ensuring that the internet was going to be free and open. Now this year, in 2017, that's when the new executive order came out, and it rolled back what the previous FCC ruling was.
Okay, so just, you can correct me if I'm wrong. So let's just say that if a communications company, we'll call it Doug White Communications, decides they want to put up a web show about security, and they don't want to carry this show because it's on a competing network, could they then filter that out? I mean, is that kind of the idea?
They could filter it out, or they could slow the speed down so that users had a very poor internet experience whenever they went on that show. So basically, think of it this way. We know how our cable companies work, and they package bundles of channels, for example, and if you want those channels, you purchase that package. If you want the expanded package, you do the plus package, and so and on and on. Same thing with movies. You want movies, you purchase the movie package. Well, the internet doesn't operate that way. The internet was designed to be free and open. So the example that you gave, let's say you had MSNBC and Fox News, and they paid ad revenue to the ISPs, but you're a new startup news entity, and so you want to offer your view on things. Well, basically, your service, your show may not be included in the package that they offer, or if they do, it would be you're going to get a great experience if you go on and you will get material on MSNBC or Fox. But if someone wants to go on your show, you have poor experience, or it's not there, or it's going to be, again, slow, very, very slow speed. It's just not going to be enjoyable to watch.
Well, yeah,
you're a very enjoyable guy.
Thank you. You too. So I do know, I was aware of that peer-to-peer stuff. Do you think that this just really means that we probably need to sit down and talk about how the internet exists in terms, I mean, the Telecommunications Act of 1933, which the name says it all. I mean, I know there's been updates to that, but not a lot. Do you think we need to sit down and rethink how we do that? Because, I mean, so much of how the internet seems to be regulated came out of how we regulate, like, the public airwaves and television and radio and all this stuff. And that a lot of that doesn't really seem to apply to me. And that maybe is where some of this is coming from.
I suppose we could look at it that way. I mean, I approach it from the perspective that the internet and access to content and users being able to go where they wanted to go, see what they wanted to see, as long as it's nothing illegal, that they should have access to the content they want to explore. So it was working fine before. I don't see it change unless you're looking at it from you're trying to monetize content and access and speeds and all that. And that's clearly why the ISPs do have an interest in this, and why the new FCC is so troubling.
Have we seen any impact from them rolling this back yet, or do we know that? I mean, is it just out there?
Not yet. But again,
pretty quick.
Precedent speaks pretty loudly. You go back to 2012, and Apple rolls out FaceTime, and then AT&T says, "Wait a minute, so you're going to be basically communicating for free over, or if you've got iPhone to iPhone over the internet, versus AT&T used to be able to charge for those services when it require that they used the cellular network. That's how they generated revenue. All of a sudden now that new service that Apple rolls out isn't going to be there. So I don't know that they will do this, but one would expect or one would wait to see if AT&T all of a sudden now, because they have this new authority, because the FCC rolled back the previous FCC rule that the internet was free and open, AT&T could very quickly enact a new policy that requires you to use FaceTime using cellular data. Big money for them. I don't know if they're going to be. I haven't heard anything that's in the works with the plans, but those are things that we have to watch out for.
And there's not that many companies that own all this stuff. I mean, the backbone core providers and all these telco companies are all big conglomerates who have all their own pieces of interest, right? So it's like you say, well, here's one, and it's company X, and they own the whole broadband service in the Northeast, and they also happen to own CBS or something like that, and all of a sudden you've got this very, to me, conflict of interest going on between all these different providers.
That's exactly right. Here in DC, I have access to one internet provider, and that's Comcast. So FiOS, for example, has not come to my area yet in my condo building, and so I don't have the choice. I'm sure many people are in the same boat. Back in Rhode Island, I have access to two ISPs. It's either Cox or FiOS, but again, in many areas, these choices are very limited.
Yeah,
no choice at all.
I mean, I definitely. I mean, I'm used to live in Colorado, and there are very limited choices in Colorado because of the distances, and a lot of small communities had literally a monopoly on just about everything. But does that make it more of a utility? I mean, that's how we ended up dealing with like electric companies, right? So they can't jack the price up when there's a storm or whatever. It's like regulated and all that. I mean, is that really where this goes?
It could, and that's something we should consider. The first thing what I'd like to see is that we act under the Congressional Review Act. One of my colleagues, Mike Doyle from Pennsylvania, is already going to be introducing a resolution of disapproval on the recent FCC new rule that undid the previous rule, and that'll be an expedited review process. I don't know what level of success we'll meet with because again, it would have to pass the resolution of disapproval. Just so your viewers are up to speed on how the Congressional Review Act works. If the a federal agency enacts a rule that Congress does not think that they overstepped, Congress can step in and they can pass a resolution of disapproval under the expedited review process, which has to happen within 60 days. And if that resolution of disapproval passed the House and Senate, would go on to the president. The president signed it, then the rule would be blocked. In this environment, I certainly don't expect that President Trump, even if it made its way through the Congress, is going to be vetoed by President Trump, since it was his FCC that passed that rule, repealing the previous rule that ensured that the internet would be free and open, and you couldn't have these tiered charges. So what will also occur, though, in addition to my colleague introducing, which I am co-sponsoring this resolution of disapproval of the SEC's rule, that there's also going to be, I'm sure, numerous lawsuits that are going to occur.
Yeah.
And we saw that in the previous, when back in 2014, when the FCC had issued a rule, and they basically said that they didn't have the power, the court said they didn't have the power to regulate under that statute, that it went to the FCC took up a new rule under a different part of the statute, which would be more accurate in terms of their ability to regulate in that area. So there'll be numerous lawsuits. Now, the key question will be here: what justification is the FCC ruling? What justification do they have for repealing the 2015 rule? So they can't just arbitrarily and capriciously repeal it for no reason. They have to offer some justification as to why that they're doing about face so quickly. And I think that's where court challenges will have the greatest level of success, because it seems to be an arbitrary, capricious about face in my view.
Well, the other piece of this, so just on the other side, the sort of big business side, if you will, I guess the only good thing that comes of it is sometimes that kind of thing does drive competition. And one thing that people have learned as they've tried to put their hands around the throat of the internet is that it's a very slippery and many tendril things. And, I know I was in China not too long ago, and my daughter and I were sitting there, and she's like, why can't I get to this? And I was like, well, because the Chinese government blocks it. And, of course, it was like, why aren't you using your VPN? And she was like, oh. And she turned her VPN on, and, of course, then we set our VPN endpoint to be London, and all of a sudden we could see British Netflix. And it does seem like that if Company X steps in and they start blocking me because I'm sponsored by Company Y, that, maybe cellular, maybe some other company steps in, or the Chinese put the new satellite up above the United States that gives us all internet through the Chinese network, and we get around it. But it does seem like it needs some regulation at this point to protect the freedom of especially smaller constituents and a lot of people that don't have access to. I mean, for me, it's like, well, I'll just buy a better data plan. But a lot of people are like, I can't afford a better data plan. And so I think there's some issues there.
Yeah, I completely agree. And that, so regulation in this area would definitely be appropriate.
Do you think that this starts leading to censorship cases, though? I mean, the FaceTime thing, I don't really consider censorship as much as it's really more of just a business decision, not necessarily a good thing for everybody, but it's not really like we picked that content and said you couldn't have it. But it also seems like I get asked this a lot by people saying, does this mean because that's been the real sort of urban legend controversy about net neutrality, is that it's going to lead to the government censoring everything. It's going to lead to AT&T censoring things. It's going to lead to Verizon censoring things. Do you think there's anything to that, or is that just more of the noise in the background?
I don't think on the government's part that it leads to censorship, but I do believe that if you can't over the internet get access to the content material that you want, that is in itself a form of censorship. Maybe it's the ISP that's doing the censoring, but the end result is ostensibly the same. So again, if you're a particular internet service provider and you're getting ad revenue from Fox News, for example, but you're not getting any revenue from MSNBC, well, clearly there's going to be more of an interest in that ISP making sure that you go to see Fox News versus you going to see MSNBC. So what does that mean? And it may not be offered in the package that you have available to you. It means very slow speeds, perhaps over the internet. You have a poor user experience. People just don't go there and watch it. They'll go to the place where it's a better user experience.
And so listen, guys. It cuts in all directions, and we're not a political show, so it cuts every direction. It's not just one versus the other. It means you may not get to see things you want to see, regardless of what your political perspective is. So it could be just as easy as you say, I can't get to this, and you can't get to that because my provider doesn't support these guys, and my provider doesn't support those. So I'm going to ask Congressman Langevin, if you could do whatever you wanted, what should we do?
Just go back to the 2015 ruling that made sure that the internet was preserved as this free and open architecture, and we're not limiting access to content or internet speeds, so that the small mom and pop person wants to start a business or offer a new type of news service and access to content that they have that ability to do so, and the internet speeds are not going to be regulated, or their content either.
So if you want to do something about it, call your congressperson and tell them how you feel about that, because if they're telling you you can't have this or that, you may want this put back in place. So be sure and let them know, because they're working on it, it sounds like, at Congress with this.
There's a resolution of disapproval that is going to be offered. I'm co-sponsoring that. Many of my other Democratic colleagues are going to be co-sponsoring it. We're hoping that we'll get some Republicans to join in that as well, and hopefully that's an option. I don't know of any yet that are going to be co-sponsoring, but it's still early, and I certainly am going to be encouraging my Republican colleagues to get on board with this, because it affects their constituents in the same way that it affects mine, and so this should be a bipartisan issue. But again, it was the Trump FCC that roll back the previous rules. So I don't know if it's going to be a bipartisan issue in Congress, but I hope it would be bipartisan.
Was that just a big business decision? I mean, why do they roll it back? Was it just because big businesses want that because they make more money?
That's right. The potential for making quite a bit more money is there, probably to the tune of billions of dollars. Is there if the ISPs create business models and packages of content that they offer to their customers, and you have to purchase that when you want access to particular type of sites and such, in the same way that we have access to cable shows and things. Again, cable was not developed as this free and open architecture, and you were going to see a variety of shows and that you didn't per se pay for. The internet was not that kind of a model. It's a different model.
Well, yeah, I mean, my cable TV, there's channels that like, I remember my daughter was little and she was wanting to watch some kids network. I don't remember what it was, but she wanted to watch it, and we couldn't get it. And I called the cable provider and we don't carry that. It costs too much or whatever. And but that's not the same thing as saying, okay, you can't have access to Wiki, or you can't have access. Yeah, I get it's just very different problem. I won't put you on the spot for much longer, but did you have any comments about Meltdown Inspector? I mean, this is of course the big news of the week, and I'm actually doing a story on Hack Naked News at 2:00 about not Meltdown Inspector, but about another problem in AMD. Did you have any comments about that, or do you have any thoughts about it?
Yeah, so it's a new vulnerability. It's more of a hardware vulnerability rather than a software vulnerability.
Mm-hmm.
So internet security community is pretty spun up about this, and it's a new, I guess, innovative vulnerability that we really haven't seen before. And so where do we go from here? I know this is very limited right now, but it is a troubling vulnerability, and is. My staff has been explaining to me, just by way of potential vulnerability to cloud information through this now new vulnerability in the chip itself. You're looking at one thing in the cloud, and it could allow you to see across a range of other material that's also in the cloud that you shouldn't have access to. Maybe proprietary, maybe PII. Those types of things now present a significant vulnerability. So it's not like in a software vulnerability where you just write a patch. Now it's harder when it's in the hardware. So this quite frankly goes to something that I've been calling for and been concerned about, and stating that we need to make sure that security is baked in. From the beginning, from the get-go, whether it's hardware or software, we need to have a renewed focus on that type of an effort and philosophy, and we're not there yet.
Yeah, I think all that earlier. I used to know a guy who built nuclear reactors as a hobby and later as a profession, and when he first started doing that in the 50s, he didn't really think about security from a perspective of someone would intentionally damage something. And I think all these old architectures are kind of caught in that world. But thank you for your comments. So Thank you so much, Congressman Langevin, for joining us. I know your time is incredibly demanded and incredibly valuable. We appreciate you always being on our show. All you out there, call your Congress people about net neutrality if you're concerned about it, and make sure they know how you feel, whatever you feel about it. Maybe you don't like it, but let them know how you feel. And we will see you again soon, Congressman.
Thank you. And people's voices do have an impact. So if they don't like what the FCC just did on net neutrality, speak out, make sure Congress, your representative, your senator hears your complaint, your concern, and hopefully that puts enough pressure on the Congress to act.
All right. Thanks for joining us. We'll be back next week with more of the new year of Secure Digital Life. See ya.